Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about trying to use a little bit of discernment when gathering information about lifting, or you look at some of the so-called experts on the internet, and they'll put out information, and I've seen this a lot. Like a decade ago, there were a bunch of guys doing this, like in evidence-based uh, training circles, like channels that died out and stuff. But occasionally I see some influencers and things trying to promote this same sort of nonsense. And again, this goes to show you that you really need to pay attention and use some common sense when listening to these people. And that's about lining up the weights with the muscle fibers. In other words, I saw someone say this years ago, that if you get the line of pull on one arm lat pull downs, right, using like a cable crossover station, that it was the perfect lat exercise with the most potential lat recruitment if you lined up the handles and the pull of your arm in line with the fibers of the lats. Okay. And it sounds really good, doesn't it? It sounds really scientific. The problem is, it's complete bullshit. Made up out of nothing that actually doesn't even work. It has no bearing whatsoever on the muscles. All right, a couple things to think about, and I'll get to the big one second. I'm going to get to the the funnier point first. The lats have an extremely wide angle of spread of insertion or origin, right? If you look at your lats, look how far they run down the spine. There's at least 20 to 30 degrees of angle involved where they attach up to the shoulder all the way down towards the spine. In terms of, because it's so wide, there's a very, very wide angle there. So first of all, it's like you're not going to line it up perfectly, because what are you going to line it up with? The center of the lat, the other edges of the lats? That's nonsense already. Especially with things like lats and pecs and muscles that have really broad areas of origin, because they insert over, 6 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches, right? That's how wide the muscle fans out. Okay, that's the first point. Number two, they're on the other side of a joint and a tendon. In other words, do you really think you're increasing efficiency on the other side of a tendon? If that muscle, like for people do it for the pecs also. All right, on the other side of it, not on the torso, the arm, the part where you're gripping the weight and pulling, this stuff all comes into a single point, a tendon. And it's on the other side from all those muscle fibers. Okay, think about this for a moment. If you're pulling against that tendon, and the tendon is what's causing it there at the joint to attach to, to the arm that gives you that movement, isn't that point the only thing that matters? Those angles don't matter, because the angles of those muscle fibers are on the other side of that single point. In other words, it's the laws of physics dictate that it actually doesn't matter in regard to that. It absolutely doesn't matter as far as lining those angles up. We're not saying that incline, flat, and decline don't do some slightly different things, because they have to do with a lot more than just that point. They have to do with where you're raising your arms to and what's happening at the rotation at the bottom. But it has nothing to do with lining up the fibers. Okay? Complete and utter nonsense. You have to watch these people. I mean, again, really look at it. There is no physics or biology or evidence behind what they're saying, while they're trying to make it sound really evidence-based. In fact, there's no evidence in the real world. I mean, who has the biggest backs and lats? Usually guys who are really good at pull-ups and rows. You see guys walking around with the most massive backs because they've taken a one-arm cable pull down and lined it up with those angles? No. It's the same thing with the people who talk about squeezing and contracting. Really, those guys usually even have the biggest backs? No, half the time they don't have any. How many fit pros do you see who you look at their back development who promote squeezing at the point of contraction, which again, scientifically we know is not true. Okay. This has been studied. We know that that's actually the point where we have the least potential for hypertrophy and muscle fiber recruitment, right? In most muscles, when the muscle is shortened, they usually have, and I can think of a lot of cases, they usually look like they've never done a pull-up in their life. They might have some delts and arms, but those guys never have a back. It's just funny, and then they'll emphasize this nonsense. Again, another example of the same sort of line of thinking with all this stuff is people who say, well, if you do dumbbells, it'll balance out your body left to right. No, it won't. If you use the same terrible form that created a unilateral imbalance with a barbell, if you try to replicate the same form with a dumbbell and the same habits, you'll be just as imbalanced. Because a barbell evenly loads each side. Look at a barbell. Watch it. Watch me do a barbell. The weight's all on the ends. You usually have it centered and balanced. And if you're offsetting it and shifting to the side, it's because one side's stronger and you're intentionally letting your form get loose to compensate so you can slide under it. Okay, you guys ever notice it on dumbbells? Here we go. That people will do the same thing. They'll compensate for their weak side. They'll shift under it when it gets hard so that the stronger side can take more of the work and get more stimulus. They'll lower their weaker side slightly less to get less mechanical tension at the hardest point. They do the exact same thing. I'm not saying dumbbells aren't great for hypertrophy. They are. I'm really big on dumbbells for accessory work. Use a lot of them. Prescribe a lot of them. But it's not because they train each side more balanced. It has to do with the way that they fatigue stuff differently, and that in some cases dumbbells can give us a longer range of motion. All right? And particularly a lot of multi-joint movements, or any movement that's involving multiple muscles, that could still be a single joint, we will tend to get more complete activation sometimes of those because our bar path or our dumbbell path will change. It'll change sometimes to compensate for the weakest and the strongest muscles involved when there's multiple muscles. So that we'll end up with better stimulation of all the muscles. As the weak ones fail, the strong ones, we tend to adjust the bar path to compensate. So dumbbells are phenomenal for hypertrophy and accessory, but they have nothing to do with training the sides more evenly. The weight's not any more even than it is with a barbell. In the same bad form that would make you use a barbell, and even will do the same thing with a dumbbell. If you have those habits, you'll replicate it on the dumbbell and you'll still be imbalanced. Right? Again, people don't think this stuff through. And these so-called experts who say this nonsense, they're just making this shit up. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.